Thanks, Wendy. Do we have Councillor Loden online? Okay, I'll just give him another minute to log in. All right, we might get started. Wendy, are we recording? Yeah, okay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the City of Vincent Ordinary Council meeting of the 15th of November 2022. My name is Susan Gonchevsky. I'm the Deputy Mayor here at the City of Vincent, and I'll be sitting here in the big chair tonight. Mayor Cole has had a family emergency and is unable to attend the meeting this evening. I would like to begin by acknowledging on behalf of the City of Vincent the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and paying respects on behalf of the city to elders past and present. Mayor Cole is an apology for this evening, and we have Councillor Loden, who I can see has just joined us on Zoom. Other than that, we are all present and accounted for. We'll move tonight to public question time and the receiving of public statements. I can see that we have quite a number of people in the chamber tonight. So if you'll bear with me, I will try and manage the crowd so that we can ensure that everybody has a chance to talk. We've got a number of significant items on the agenda. Can I just get a show of hands for people who are here for Charles Street? Okay. And for people who are here for, is there people from Palmerston Street that are on the agenda? No. Is that Mr. Peroni? I tell you here for Palmerston Street, yeah? Yep, that's fine. And do we have anyone here in relation to JDAT matters? Okay, all right. Given that we've got quite a crowd to get through, I will actually ask the Charles Street people to come forward. I believe that Carlia McCallum is, oh, that's absolutely fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, is Carlia in the audience? Yeah, Carlia, did you want to come forward first? And understand you have a commitment you have to get to. Thanks, everyone. Everyone's got 3 minutes. We just ask that you state your name and the suburb in which you reside and the item that you're speaking on this evening or the matter that you wish to discuss with council. Everyone has 3 minutes. We'll get through everybody that wants to talk, and you'll hear an alarm at the end of the 3 minutes. So we do ask that you then wrap up your statement as quickly as possible. As always, we ask that you keep things respectful. And if you're going over, I will, given the number of people, I'm going to make sure everyone sticks to time. So thank you. First speaker, please.
My name's Carlia McCallum and I'm in Coolbinia. I just wanted to talk about the Charles Street matter. I actually don't have too much to add. I think the council submission is really strong, and I just wanted to thank you for the strength of the submission. There are a lot of community members who are relieved and pleased to see the submission. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Carlia. You're welcome to follow the rest of the meeting via the live stream. Is there anyone else to speak to Charles Street this evening? No. Mr. Peroni, would you like to come and talk about the, did you want to speak about the item that's on the agenda in relation to the property on Palmerston Street?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Well, my daughter Eva illustrated our thoughts at the last previous meeting, and since then we have had the privilege of meeting with some of your councillors, including Jay, who has been extremely helpful and very, very accommodating and concerned about our issues. And I'd like to publicly thank them all for their courtesy that has been extended to us all and to hear our issues, which was much appreciated. I think it's probably the first time since 1959 that I lived in the area that I have seen such a group of people that are really concerned of what's going on in the area. And I don't think that they could have illustrated their concerns any better. I sincerely hope that perhaps since the evening that we had, they have had the opportunity of considering our issues, and that they would use, without any doubt, I hope, their common sense and that took aboard everything that we were concerned with. So I'm here hoping to hear a fair judgment, and that the only thing that we ever asked more than anything else is that nothing has been contrary to the building or the project going, because we can't stop progress. But I would like perhaps the common sense to ensure that the rules and the bylaws of the council will be considered and applied on this occasion as they were presented, both in writing and also verbally while we were here the other night. So thank you for everyone who attended. It was very, very appreciated, and thank you for the opportunity of asking me back on the dais. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perrone. Okay, do we have, so no more speakers to those two issues? I will now open the floor to anyone who wishes to speak to items either on the agenda or just to bring a matter to the attention of council.
Caligero Caffarelli, 166 Chelmsford Road, North Perth. I came in here yesterday regarding a freedom of information matter, but they told me I had to email. Instead, I'm bringing the copies here. That I have one for the mayor, the CEO, and each of the councillors that I'd like to hand over.
Thank you. The CEO will take that now.
I'd like to get a call on that, thanks. Okay. I've already given one to the minister, considering he was the mayor at the time. And now I'd like to speak on Angove and Woodville Street. Personally, I don't believe that a major thoroughfare that's been turned into a local road could be allowed to have a petrol station on. Either that, as I've spoken to the chap over there, I mean, if you're willing to put a petrol station there, I do believe you should pull out all the trees, pull out all the parking, and turn it back into a major thoroughfare as it always was. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name's Don Barber, 15 Daphne Street, representing the STS Group and the 1,200 in-person and online petition signatories re JAD application number 5.2022.270.1. The STS Group, in association with residents of North Perth, visitors to Angove Street, and the 4,500 visitors to our social media platforms, are proud to have given a voice to the significant concerns regarding the proposed service station JDAP application. As outlined last week, some of our concerns at the council meeting, and as per our written submission. So I won't reinstate those, other than to note that the additional 2,123 day increase in vehicular traffic will have a most deleterious effect on members of the North Perth community and patrons of rate-paying North Perth businesses. These residents and visitors flock to Angove Street as the hub of the funky urban village that Vincent's former mayors, the Honourable Alana McTiernan and the Honourable John Carey, lobbied so hard and so successfully to protect. Having established that there are no restrictions or laws in having the RAR report presented to council, it is now incumbent on our elected members to table and vote on the report. There should be no reasons preventing councils in having the report presented, as evidenced by the statement from the CEO of the City of Vincent. The city has not previously submitted RARs to a council meeting for consideration. There is, however, no prohibition on doing so. Let me repeat that. There is no prohibition in actually doing so. We request councillors follow the example of other councils, such as the City of Stirling and Rockingham, just to name a few, in allowing our elected members to discuss and vote on RAR reports. This is simply, members, just good governance. It demonstrates accountability to the community the councillors are elected to serve. We understand that some councillors have concerns that it may prejudice the JDAP process and should therefore be reassuring to note that the City of Stirling and other councillors do table and vote upon such reports without prejudicing the JDAP process. And so tonight, we invite councillors to demonstrate transparency and accountability by tabling the RAR report for discussion and voting before the JDAP process. I thank the council for its indulgence.
Thank you, Don. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Sharon Barber, also of Daphne Street, North Perth. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the JDAP application. As a member of the Stop the Station group, I will allow that submission to speak for itself, and it's my sincere hope that each and every councillor will familiarise themselves with it. We trust it represents the concerns of the many ratepayers and other concerned citizens who signed our petition, visited our corner on Angove Street and shared their concerns with us. We accept that the developer submitted its proposal in good faith, given the current discretionary zoning of the site. Admittedly, it's a missed opportunity that the council didn't take the opportunity to rezone the site, given the 8 years the former owners were endeavouring to sell. But the proposed redevelopment is clearly not the best possible use of this prime position on the vibrant Angove Cafe strip. Two more suitable sites, that on the corner of Fitzgerald Street and on the corner of Scarborough Beach Road, were also service stations, but both have since been sold and repurposed. So let's move forward. We, the North Perth community, have played our part in participating in the submission process and attending tonight. So I've actually come here tonight to congratulate Council on the outstanding job it's done in fostering a sense of community in North Perth. The Imagine Vincent program has been a fantastic lightning rod for devising creative solutions to grow a green, inclusive, and pedestrian-friendly community. While community can't be manufactured, thanks to the council's vigorous leadership, North Perth residents have voted with their feet. And it's been a joy to watch the Angove Strip evolve organically into the beating heart of our famous North Perth village, a warm and caring place where friends and families come together. But communities are fragile ecosystems. They need to be nurtured, not threatened. We've addressed the development criteria, but common sense tells us that plonking a 24/7 service station in the middle of a thriving village makes about as much sense as dropping a gas station into the middle of the Piazza Navona. Councillors, we've done our bit to support our community, and we've elected you to represent us and defend the tremendous community building work that Council has already achieved. Inaction, however, speaks as loudly as action, especially when there's no legal barrier to Council exercising its discretion and rejecting this proposal. But to do that, you've first got to discuss the matter. You've got to vote. You've got to care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and councillors. My name's Janine McDonald. I live in North Perth and I'm also speaking regarding the proposed service station development at 41 to 43 and 45 Angove Street, North Perth. I'm going to reference the City of Vincent's Public Health Plan 2020 to 2025, which provides a framework for the health and well-being of the local community. And my references will be quotes from this document, including: the city has a role to ensure these environments are healthy, safe, clean, green, and accessible. The Public Health Plan details 5 public health pillars, which capture where the city can have the greatest influence in community health and well-being. Pillar number 1, public health leadership. The city aims to ensure public health outcomes are embedded within everything that we do for the benefit of the community. Pillar number 2, social environment, supports optimal physical, mental, and social health and well-being for people who work, live, and visit the city. Pillar number 3, built environment, can support our health and well-being by having good walkability, space for bike riding, allowing ease of access to organised and incidental physical activity, and opportunities for social and community interactions. Pillar number 4, natural environment, to deliver a sustainable natural environment from the harmful effects, health impacts of the climate change. It's important that the city plans for and responds to emerging risks associated with climate change. And pillar number 5, health protection, local businesses to incorporate public health assurances into their operations. Strategic Action Plan Health Protection number 17, environmental health, long-term health outcome for the city is reduced exposure to environmental health risks. And referencing local planning scheme number 2, district centre zone objectives, point 1 says to provide a community focus point for people, services, employment and leisure that are highly accessible and do not expand into or adversely impact on adjoining residential areas. Point 2 says to encourage high quality pedestrian friendly street orientated development that responds to and enhances the key developments of each district centre and to develop areas for public interaction. And point 7 says to encourage the retention and promotion of uses, including but not limited to specialty shopping, restaurants, cafes and entertainment. Angrove Street currently contains restaurants, cafes, specialty shops and services and residences, all in a 40-kilometre-hour speed zone, with a primary school just around the corner, and Woodville and Daphne Streets are home to many families. An 8 Bowser 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service station, bringing approximately 2,000 additional cars to Woodville and Angrove Streets on a daily basis, plus petrol tankers approximately 3 times per week, and crossovers of 9.1 metres on Angrove Street and 14.1 metres on Woodville Street, is a complete opposite of supporting public health and safety, health and wellbeing, walkability and safe bike riding. It is not an important part of the solution to deliver a sustainable natural environment, and it will be detrimental to the patronage of the restaurants, cafes and specialty shops. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Yes, we're very proud of our public health plan, so thank you for bringing that forward. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and councillors. My name is Nicole Wolf and I live at 25 Woodville Street, North Perth. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My husband Elliot and I took out a loan to buy a house on Woodville Street 2 years ago. We found the perfect house just behind Angrove Street, about 4 houses behind the strip. It was the perfect place to raise a family. It's close to the cafes, daycare and schools. Now we have twin babies at home and we spend every day with them living our North Perth dream, whether that's enjoying alfresco breakfast or getting fresh air on the strip. The petrol station proposal seeks to destroy our North Perth family dream. How could we continue to live in our house or send our children to daycare, knowing that we're exposing them to fumes that increase the chance of leukemia? What will happen to the businesses that we love when their customers are driven away? I sure wouldn't want to sit there sipping coffee, looking at an 8 Bowser petrol station and smelling petrol fumes. How are we going to safely exit our laneway with our children with increased traffic and huge petrol tankers barreling down the road up to 3 times a week? Just because current planning allows for something does not mean that it should be done. I implore you not to destroy the character of our unique town centre and the families that call it home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Can I have the next speaker, please?
My name is Marlene Wolf, a relative. I also live in North Perth. My discussion is a little bit different from what has been proposed before. I look at it from a logistic point of view and a legal point of view. Yes, I understand the zoning should have been changed because the aspect of Angrove Street has changed and that opportunity was missed and it has been sold to another station. But 50 years ago, we didn't understand the concept of health like we do today. My daughter-in-law tells me that within 50 metres of a petrol station, leukemia in children goes up by 50%. Now, I understand the school is a little bit further than 50 metres, but it is still within a period where leukemia increases within children. So yes, I understand that to settle with the petrol station people is going to cost the council a lot of money. But I also would like to bring to the council's notice that so is litigious parents whose children become sick. When you understand now the concept of health and safety, and you still put a petrol station within 100 meters of a primary school, an area where people sit and have coffee with their children and themselves. And this, to me, on a purely money-based system, you will be the big losers in this.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Helen O'Toole and I've lived in North Perth. I'm in Mount Lawley by one street since 1987, and I have a 50-year career in education. So I speak for the children who don't have a voice. I was once a principal of a school that was right opposite a petrol station. We had to have there, it was in Rockingham Road, down in Munster, we had to have a safety set up because of the risks that petrol tankers have been known to leak petrol, burst into flames, and our school would have been impacted. I speak for those little children at North Perth Primary School. I see so many of them walking with their parents, riding their bikes, their scooters, stopping to have a chino on the way. It is a delight to see the beautiful Ango Street area. It will be destroyed if we have petrol tankers barreling. I love the person who said that word. That's exactly what petrol tankers do. It is not the place for a petrol station. That time has gone. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's passionate and informed commentary today. One thing I would like to make clear to you is that the petrol station development is listed for decision at the Joint Metro West Development Assessment Panel. This council is not the decision maker in relation to this application. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. But you're very welcome to come forward and continue to engage with council at this meeting on this matter or any other. Can I have the next speaker, please?
Craig Willis, long-term resident at Woodville Street. Probably timely about that comment that was just made. I'm going to take a bit of a different tact. Behind me is a whole bunch of people going to tell you all the reasons why this shouldn't go ahead. And I think that we probably need to do this different. I've met a lot of the councillors and although they can't write down the reasons why this shouldn't go ahead, in their faces I can see that everyone's just basically appalled with the whole thing. This will not be, this is too high, this is too big, this doesn't fit. This will change the paradigm of North Perth completely, and we all know it. So what I would suggest is that we actually do something about it collectively. Now, I know there's a very high skill level within this council group. So one of the things that has happened, and obviously I don't know the CEO, but I'm suggesting the same thing. We have a capable group of people here that can put a submission with more power than what the JDAP will otherwise get. That's what Donna's actually asking for, is that we actually stand up collectively, because this is not about, you know, the smaller things. This is about changing North Perth. And if we let it go through forever, it'll change. And you guys will be responsible for the banner that changes it, because you're gonna, if it does get approved, there'll be a fossil fuel banner that will be there forever. That this is what's happened, and it'll be basically on this council for not doing it. Now, I implore you to stand up, and everyone at least read the documents, because I spoke to a number of you. You don't even know that there's assets involved that have been asked to be given up by the council. And I can't believe that we're actually not discussing that, because as a ratepayer, I want to know that the actual assets are being looked after. Now, Jay's been fantastic, but he can only do so much. Where the voice of the people is through this collective group, I believe. Now, we have examples where the JDAP has actually listened to other councils, and I just don't understand why we don't put a motion to actually discuss all the ins and outs with all the expertise. We have media personalities there, or someone that can get a hold of media. We have scientists there. We can attack this on so many fronts, because at the end of the day, if this gets up, the detriment will be on all of us, to the detriment of North Perth. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Next speaker, please.
Frank Kniswich, I live in North Perth. I'm sure you've all seen that wonderful Australian film called The Castle. I think this is North Perth's castle. I think everything that everyone else has said already tonight, I fully endorse. I think that North Perth is a particular type of suburb, and that area in particular is something special within North Perth. And I think putting a petrol station in that particular locale doesn't make sense, particularly on the corner. It's a very busy intersection, very difficult intersection at the best of times. Adding additional significant traffic flow, I think is ludicrous. It really makes no sense. And on top of it, I ask one question of everybody. Where's the need? There's no need for a petrol station right there. If you go 200 meters down the bottom of the hill, there's a petrol station. If you go another 500 meters up the road the other way, there's another petrol station. There's 3 petrol stations within a kilometre of that exact spot that I can think of immediately. There's just no need. It makes no sense. And like everyone said, it will destroy the area. It will detract from the amenity that every single resident here has and is here for. Let's make this our castle moment.
Thank you, Frank. Is there any other speakers? Yes, please come forward.
Hi, councillors, thank you. My name is Bronwyn Tyson, and I don't live in North Perth, but my association with Mount Hawthorn, where I do live, goes back to the 1950s. And I will say one thing, one of you elected members by now should have had a notice of motion up. It may well go to the JDAP, but the JDAP listened to the city. So as representatives, as elected members of the people here, I would have thought one of you would have prepared a notice of motion and had it ready to go and supported it. I expect every elected member here to support this. And I speak as someone who doesn't live in North Perth, but I completely support the families that do. This is a huge health issue. The ramifications will affect the city of Vincent for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Oh, Mr. Prenny, you're actually authorised to speak once in a council meeting. Sorry. Please come forward. Oh, no. There will be other council meetings, I'm sure, between now and when this matter is finalised.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I live at number 3 Daphne Street. So I'm the first house on the right-hand side as you come out of the service station. And we get to see all the hoons that come up and down that street already. We've lost
May I
our
have your
fence.
name, sir?
Wayne Davis, sorry.
Thank you,
Number
Wayne.
3 Daphne Street. We've already lost our fence twice by these hoons coming up and down the street, and the speed humps don't help at all. They just encourage them, especially on the weekend. I've also been involved in the transport business, and I can tell you now, and that's been in the tanker game. The tankers are what they call 3-wheelers on the back, so they can carry 60 tonne. I wouldn't like to, and I've got a license to drive one of those. I certainly wouldn't like to be driving into that service station filling up with fuel. I don't know how they're going to get around that problem. The other issue I have is, of course, we used to have a school guard on that crossing, but we lost that school guard. And many a morning, I cannot believe how close we come to these people that speed up that road. So with another 2,000 cars going down that road, I'm just in tears thinking a tragedy is going to happen. We come so close. My wife, Jill, and I have seen it, where these cars with the children crossing, so all the parents are stuck trying to get their children across that road. And most of the children live on the Daphne Seat side of that school. So I'm imploring to the council to follow the lead that Don's group is doing. I'm very disappointed in you also that you have not made a submission. I mean, that's what your job is. That's why we elect you. We're a ratepayer. I'm very disappointed that you have not done that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. My name is Elliot Wolf. I live at 25 Woodville Street with my wife, Nicole, and sometimes my mother, Marlene. I haven't prepared anything. I really echo everything everyone has said today, but I just wanted to reinforce it. And I think the point that the gentleman behind me made about the lack of need is a really important one, along with the lack of want. Nobody wants this. I've yet to hear a good reason for it. It being zoned already as a petrol station is obviously not good enough and antiquated and a glorified clerical error. And the only other one is money. So really this needs to come down to a conscience decision. What do you feel is right under these circumstances? Do you want to put everybody at risk? Do you want to potentially lose the heart of North Perth and the things that have been built around it and the booming cafe strip that's been developed and the close-knit communities for money? We all say no. We all think you should say no. There's absolutely no reason for it. Again, nobody here wants it. Please go into bat for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Sylvia Galea, and I'm not a public speaker. So I just want to, and I live in North Perth, and I just want, I agree with everything everyone's saying, and I really think that a big effort should take place and not having a petrol station in our community.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Appreciate you coming in tonight. Are there any further speakers this evening?
My name's Steve Carter. I live in Knutsford Street, North Perth. Thanks for the opportunity to have a chat about this. The wonderful community that has developed in Ango Street is fantastic. I believe the service station on the corner, even though you've tried to shield it in a beautiful facade, will still stand out like the proverbial. The streetscape is wonderful. The intersection that exists at the moment is a trial to try and get through it most times. So trying to position a tanker at that intersection along with additional cars during the day. And who wants the traffic at night? It's going to be a nightmare, I feel, for the residents. So please, I implore you to make submissions against this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, if we've got no further speakers, we will move on to response to previous public questions taken on notice. Yeah, so the response to previous public questions taken on notice was in the agenda. Now we move on to applications for leave of absence. Oh, my apologies. I always miss this one. We received 2 written questions prior to the meeting, and the Executive Manager for Strategy and Governance will read them out.
Through the chair, questions received this evening. One question received from Natalie Jalekowski of North Perth in relation to item 9.6. In relation to requests for questions to the Minister for Transport regarding the Charles Street concept and the costs associated with the delivery of this project, and whether or not the city could investigate if there's any character or heritage significance that could be identified to protect some of the sites in the location. Also, a question received from Don Barber of North Perth in relation to whether or not the city's councillors can call in the JDAP application for a consideration prior to the report being presented to the DAP.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Okay, we'll just move on to item 4, applications for leave of absence. So do we have any? There are none. Now to item 5, the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. A petition with 326 signatures was submitted by Don Barber of the STS Group requesting that council does not approve the proposed construction of a new service station at number 41 to 43 Angove Street and the existing dwelling at number 45 Angove Street. The petition states that the petitioners believe that a new service station will increased capacity will be detrimental to the cafe strip on Angove Street and cause additional traffic issues to pedestrians and school children who attend on the adjacent site. The 2 streets, Woodville and Angove Street, servicing the proposed development are too narrow for any additional traffic flow. In addition, we believe that there are health issues to the patrons of the cafe strip with the additional emissions from the proposed site. The approved use of the site as a service station is a relic of a past era when Angove Street had no cafe strip, small traffic flow, and is no longer commensurate with today's community usage. Angove Street is the beating heart of our funky urban village in North Perth. Now, councillors, on receipt of a petition, councillors have a number of options under the City of Vincent Meeting Procedures Local Law 2008 that we read the petition and then we will vote on the petition. The only motions that can be made in relation to a petition are A, that the petition be received, B, that the petition be received and a report prepared, or C, that the petition be received and be referred to a committee for consideration and report, or lastly, that the petition be received and be dealt with by the council. In the absence of any other proposition, I would propose that we move to A, that the petition be received, noting that there is, I think, an amendment on the table for discussion this evening that would potentially lead to this item being discussed in a council meeting, and that the City of its administration has also undertaken a consultation in relation to this matter. Do I have a mover for that motion or any other? Councillor Apollo.
Can I just have the wording? What's the wording of the, I haven't read the petition. So what's the wording of the petition?
It was exactly what I just read to you. I can read it again for you if you like. The petition was requesting that council does not approve the proposed construction of a new service station at number 41 to 43 Angove Street and the existing dwelling at number 45 Angove Street. Then that's, yeah. Is there a mover for a motion to receive the petition? Moved Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Iapolo. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. The petition is received. We'll now move on to the confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on 18th of October 2022 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Wallace, seconded Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? All that carried. Announcements by the presiding member without discussion. I do note we've had a fairly extended public question time, but I don't get this chance very often. So I just want to call out a couple of events from this weekend. Pride Fest Fair Day and the Young Makers Market that were both fantastic. And just to extend congratulations to the organiser of these ongoing events within the City of Vincent. I'd also just like to briefly call out a couple of things coming up. Next week, there is the launch of the City of Vincent Smoke-Free Town Centres, a fabulous public health initiative, and one that was, I guess, came out of the City of Vincent's public health plan. And I'd also like to note that the Speedy Park 60th anniversary celebrations will be held on the 25th and 26th of November. And then just, if I may, if you would just indulge me, I have to call out my hero and now WA's local hero of 2023, James, which took me by a bit surprise this morning, Jimmy Murphy. Jimmy Murphy was a councillor at the City of Vincent from 2015-2019 and has been recognised today for his work as the founder of the Town Team movement, which really had its genesis within the City of Vincent. And I'd just like to extend congratulations to Jimmy and all those involved with town teams. We love the work that you do and value all the good you bring to our community. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to declarations of interest. CEO, do we have any on the table tonight?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. The declarations of interest I've received, two are in the agenda. First from Councillor Warner, financial interest in relation to item 11.4, which is the first quarter budget review, noting that Councillor Warner is a director of Upbeat Events, which managed the Oxford Street activation and worked closely with the Waffle City of Vincent staff and Leadable Connect. She is not seeking approval to participate in the debate, nor to remain in the chambers, nor to vote on the matter. Councillor Wallace has declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.6, the Charles Street planning study. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Wallace is currently directly employed by Lang O'Rourke to work on two MRWA projects. Lang O'Rourke is in a partnership agreement with Main Roads on both. Under the agreement, Main Roads is the owner and Lang O'Rourke is a construction non-owner participant. And the last declaration of interest I've received is from Councillor Loden. It's a declaration of impartiality, noting that Councillor Loden is an acquaintance with one of the potentially impacted property owners on Charles Street, and that's in relation to the same item 9.6.
Thank you, CEO. I'll now go around the table to see if there's items that councillors would like to call out for discussion. So far I have 9.1, 9.6, and we've got a financial interest in relation to 11.4. Because we need to deal with 11.4 before we deal with 9.5, I believe. No? I was told that we did. Yes, thank you, Reece. Thank you, and thank you, Wendy, for that heads up. So is there any other items that councillors like to call out? Councillor Hallett.
10.2.
Councillor Castle. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Alpolo. 9.4. Yep, Councillor Warner.
12.3.
Councillor Loden. And Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, 12.3 also.
Yep, okay. Thank you. Just give me and the CEO a minute and we'll work out the en bloc items.
Ross, did you do 17.1?
Deputy Mayor, can we please add 17.1? Thanks.
I'll now ask for, we're going to move to en bloc items. CEO, can you please read the list of items that are proposed to be moved en bloc this evening?
Through your Deputy Mayor, those items are as follows: item 9.2, item 9.3, item 10.1, item 11.1, and sorry, 9.5 as well is on block. So 9.3, 9.5, 10.1, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.5, 12.1, and 12.2.
Can I have a mover and a seconder for the en bloc items, please? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Warner. All those in favour? All that carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 9.6, the Charles Street planning study. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Castle. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is a detailed submission that outlines the key issues with the Main Roads proposal. It's a retrograde approach to urban and transport planning that further entrenches a reliance on cars with all the climate and health impacts that entails, as well as dividing neighbourhoods and destroying homes. Frankly, it's a shocking proposal that should never have saw the light of day in 2022, and so too was the approach to consultation and the communication with the city about the plan. I wholeheartedly support administration's critique of the Charles Street planning study and thank staff for their work in preparing it, and also to the Brains Trust in the Vincent community that made additional suggestions.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree. I think that there's been a lot of issues with how this particular proposal has been handled by Main Roads, and it certainly doesn't meet the standards that we would like to see for consultation in the City of Vincent. And really want to extend a thank you to both administration for preparing the submission and to all the community members who have contacted us and come and spoke in the chamber today and last week. They have really helped to flesh out what is now quite a robust submission on this proposal, which flies in the face of almost every policy we have at the City of Vincent, which is to prioritise the environment, pedestrians, cyclists, and our residents over cars. So I definitely support the endorsement of the submission. I do have a question that arises from the public, the written questions that we received today, in particular, whether it is possible or what scope there might be to request some information around the process. The suggestion in the written questions is a parliamentary question to Rita Safiotti around the taxpayer costs. I'm not sure if that is the correct approach, but whether there is some scope for us to request more detail on this process and really question how it came to be presented to our community without any consultation. And secondly, I think the suggestion around investigating the history, value and the character buildings on Charles Street is well worth looking into, and it's something that I hope we can investigate in the near future that might also assist with this proposal.
CEO.
Through you, Mayor Colders, to comment on the last point first about the character. We have suggested that Main Roads undertake an urban design study of that street, which would then pick up those important character and heritage elements. Just on the costs for the project, which are absorbed by Main Roads. Main Roads do have a very large scale planning function. So they're well funded internally to undertake a range of long-term planning projects for roads throughout the state. So as a proportion of their overall budget and operation, the amount of time and effort and consulting costs and the production of the consultation materials would be an extremely small portion of Main Roads' internal budget at the start of these long-term planning projects. So I'd describe it as a rounding error in the bigger Main Roads budgets, but that could be accessible by members of the community through an FOI request if there was a public interest in releasing that type of specific information.
Councillor Castle. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, it was noted last week that Vincent carries an unusual and significant burden in transmitting significant volumes of through traffic north-south through our community, with 4-lane roads covering the community into blocks between Loftus, Charles, Fitzgerald and Lord, each only separated by around 500 metres. Managing huge roads and massive traffic volumes through our town centres in North Perth and Mount Lawley in particular is a difficult challenge for the city, as they have significantly detract from the amenity of these commercial and community spaces. There's a constant tension between that traffic and the city's objectives around walkability, streetscape amenity and livability. This proposal exacerbates those problems and then adds some. It's an extension of a freeway-like road space right through the heart of our community. The freeway currently terminates at the ramps at Newcastle Street. This proposal continues that freeway design philosophy of concrete-bound channeling of large volumes of high-speed traffic now through a residential area. Infrastructure spending leads individual transport mode choices. If we spend hundreds of millions of dollars adding to our road network, we are encouraging and incentivizing the use of personal cars. As a local government, we don't command these funds or have an ability to allocate them, but I do hope that the relevant decision makers within Main Roads, Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and the relevant state ministers listen to this strong and clear submission from the city on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Arbella.
I also endorse the comments made by the councillors who spoke before me and the members in the public gallery, the residents in the public gallery. I think I'm going to endorse the submission that administration had written. Just want to make a comment about the main roads process. I mean, I just found it very scant in detail, and I recognise that planning 20 years ahead for the future growth of Perth is important, and so there needs to be a plan. I was just shocked that there was no other options that were included. Like, did they consider an underground train, on that underneath Charles Street? I do acknowledge that that's an important road for the northern suburbs, because that Charles Street into Wanneroo Road and the Mitchell Freeway are the main northbound corridors, which obviously important. But I was just exacerbated by the lack of options and the method of communication. So the reason I'm mentioning all this is that whilst administration, presumably after council's endorsed the submission, will put that to Main Roads, that I think it's also important for the CEO to continue the dialogue with Main Roads to understand in more broader terms what are the other options that were looked at. And I think that it's all good and well that this proposal, hopefully falls down, but I think it is important that we still have an open mind as to what are the solutions for a growing Perth population, whether that's for Charles Street or for all our, arterial main roads that go through Vincent. I think we need to know that, and hopefully there is some other more progressive options that are being considered. So I think that's important for us to continue that dialogue.
Thank you, councillor. Any further speakers on this item? No. CEO, would you like to respond?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, can I just note in terms of the submission to capture the point made by the speaker from the public gallery, we would just add under 3.4 where we are requesting Main Roads to undertake a comprehensive urban design study with a list of issues we want them to consider. We would add character and heritage to that list, if that's okay, on that submission to pick up on that point.
So does this require an amendment?
We will put that in if council's okay with that. The current sentence reads, the city requests Main Roads undertake a comprehensive urban design study that includes public health impacts, construction impacts, including noise and pollution, and a business case for several options that can then be presented to the community. The urban design study must cover the social, environmental, economic and financial impacts and feasibility of the option. We will just add the words character and heritage into that list.
So CEO, you're suggesting that a councillor may wish to put forward an amendment to that effect? Councillor Castle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to move that amendment. I think in an abundance of caution, it's probably important that the report reflects exactly what we are submitting. So if there's a seconder, I'd like to propose that we add the words character and heritage as outlined by the CEO.
To have a seconder, Councillor Arapolo. Councillor Castle, did you wish to speak to the amendment or clarify the wording? Could we, Councillor Loden, you had your hand up. Were you seeking to clarify the wording of the amendment that Councillor Castle has just moved?
No, I just put my hand up to second it and the internet decided to leave my hand up, unfortunately.
Thank you. When did you have the wording for that amendment? You're satisfied that you've got the wording? Great. Councillor Arapolo, you're happy with that? Okay. Do I have any speakers on the amendment? No. Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? It's carried. Back to the substantive. CEO, did you have any other comments in relation to this item? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. We'll now go back to item 9.1, number 109, lot 100, Palmerston Street, Perth, proposed for group dwellings. I have a mover and seconder for this item. Moved Councillor Wallace. Seconded Councillor Arapolo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I've moved it. I'm not sure that I actually support the motion though. I do enjoy a lot of the design. I think the material choice is nice. I think some of the landscaping choices are pretty good. I think generally it presents pretty well to the street. I guess reductions in setback notwithstanding. I do, however, think it's unnecessarily and unfairly impactful to the neighbours to the south. In particular, the lot boundaries to the south and the height of the building considerably overshadow those 4 townhouses. Acknowledge that on the plans, this is indicated to generally fall over areas marked as a driveway and parking. However, after a site visit this week, it's really clear that those townhouses actually use that area as outdoor living space as well. So I think in that context, the 20% increase in the amount of overshadowed area above the deemed to comply standards not acceptable. So yeah, on that basis, I won't be supporting it. I do have an alternate recommendation for refusal, but would also be open to the idea of deferral to allow an amendment to occur.
Thank you. Councillor Apollo.
I've got some concerns with this one as well, mainly because of the 10 out of 15 planning elements don't meet the deemed to comply. And I appreciate that there's discretion that council can exercise, but in my view, the ones that were most concerning was, in addition to the one that Councillor Wallace mentioned with overshadowing, because I think that's probably the most important, with a just over 60% overshadowing. The other ones was the street setback and the privacy planning element. So I do have some concerns, but before I make a decision on it, I'd like to hear from what the other councillors have to say and input on the subject. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Is there any further speakers on this item? Councillor Hallett.
Can I move an amendment and then I'd like to ask some questions?
Is this an amendment on the grey?
It is indeed.
Thank you. Councillors, you have this in front of you. And Councillor Loden, do you have the wording of the proposed amendment through docs on tap? Would you like to outline your amendment before I seek a seconder?
Sure. So I'd just like to propose an amendment that inserts a condition to ensure that the brick colour and finish used for the development is consistent with the brickwork shown in the perspectives. This was an issue that was raised by neighbours at our site visit, where the revised graphics in the proposal show lighter bricks, and that significantly improved the appearance from the original all dark design.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Warner. Do you wish to speak on it, Councillor Hallett? Councillor Warner? No. Does anyone like to speak to the amendment? Councillor Wallace?
Just to note, there's an extra "and" at the end, but that's a really trivial point. Maybe not even worth speaking about.
Councillor Hallett?
Does my seconder agree to remove the "and"?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no speakers on this matter, I will put the amendment. All those in favour? That's carried. Now back to the substantive. Councillor Hallett?
Yep. Can I just find out, in terms of statutory timelines, what would be the impact of a deferral?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the application is dated 13th of July 2022, so we've passed the statutory timeframe. That timeframe reflects administration working together with the applicant as well as community to improve the built form outcome.
Councillor Hallett, anything further?
Yeah, I guess that makes it a bit more difficult. So I wouldn't support a deferral if it came up, because that would leave it open for the applicant to go to SAT and potentially put forward something without any of the conditions that we've applied. I also heard and absolutely understand the concerns about overshadowing. I guess from my perspective, the amount of overshadowing from a completely compliant 3-storey dwelling was also significant, and you couldn't get away from that with this block. That's not to say that there's some discretion in the amount that's in addition. There's the added aspect of the shadowing from the massive fig tree as well. On the basis of that alone, I'm not sure that I would support a refusal there.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a question in relation to the overshadowing. I'm just looking at unnumbered page 129, I think, of the report that that is a visual showing the difference in overshadowing between the deemed to comply site and the proposal. And I'm just wondering if you could give some context to that additional overshadowing and where that falls. I was not able to make the site visit, so I'd just be keen to hear from administration about the increased impact of the overshadowing.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that is attachment 11. I understand that you're referring to. Yep. I think so. Yes, which does a comparison between the proposed developments overshadowing measured on 21st of June, which is winter solstice when overshadowing is at its worst. And it also shows the extent of overshadowing from the development if it was set back from the lot boundary consistent with the deemed to comply standard, as well as if that proposed development was reduced in height to meet the building height as well, deemed to comply standard. So it shows that comparison. You'll see that the additional overshadowing amounts to approximately 3.4%, and that primarily falls over the driveway area between the units to the street and then the units to the rear. So that driveway area, and you heard Councillor Wallace refer to it, we attended a site visit, and though that driveway area accommodates vehicle car parking, and that was what it was approved for, it's very clear that the occupants, just with evolution in terms of using the property, have opted to also provide a drying area to that front portion near the entry to the homes, as well as a informal outdoor space where there's table and chairs and such. So that's how they're currently using those spaces in the driveway area.
Thank you. And in terms of considering that impact, are we required to consider it as it was planned for, i.e. as per this diagram, or how it's actually being used?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, it's a good question. Ultimately, council in determining this needs to consider the extent of impact, detrimental impact on the amenity or the enjoyment of the use of these spaces. And there is an existing amenity benefit, I would say, based on the way the occupants are using that. So that is relevant in your decision making, but you just need to balance that with the fact that these spaces are also used for a car parking space, which is not an active outdoor function as well, but that has evolved in time. So it's really, you're required to balance between the two, but it is a relevant consideration that they are using that for active, outdoor pursuits.
Thank you. And are these the only outdoor living areas for the neighbouring property, or do they have other spaces as well?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, on that same plan, you'll see outdoor living areas denoted to the rear of those back units, and then outdoor living areas denoted to the front of the units facing onto Palmerston Street. So there's separate outdoor living spaces.
Thank you. And if we were to defer this item, what options would be available to the applicant to actually reduce this overshadowing? Is that a major redesign of the application, or are there smaller adjustments they could make that could address it?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, there's a raft of options available to the applicant to address the extent of overshadowing. Some of those planning elements that relate to or that can compound overshadowing have been mentioned tonight: lot boundary setbacks, street setback, building height. Those are all planning elements available to the applicant. Again, it's just whether the applicant makes the extent of change necessary to satisfy council members.
Thanks. And has that been discussed with the applicant, or are they at the point where they would like this application to be assessed as is.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the experience with the applicant has been lengthy in trying to get it to this point. So there's been numerous changes with the input from our design review panel as well as working together with the city's officers. So they've made those changes to this point. I wouldn't say that they were easy changes for the applicant to make, but they were satisfied that this was an appropriate built form outcome, and administration on balance also had shared that same view. So it'd be difficult for me to say whether they would want this to be determined tonight without the prospect or an opportunity to revisit any minor changes.
Thank you. Look, this is not an easy application, and I can see that there are some concerns with overshadowing and the impact on the neighbours. However, I'm not sure that I'm convinced there is sufficient grounds to refuse. I think this is a close call. I am mindful of the rounds of engagement with the DRP and the changes that have been made to get it to this point, and that it is a difficult site in the first place, in that deemed to comply overshadowing is quite significant and we can't avoid that. I'm really not convinced that we have sufficient grounds to refuse that would stand up to consideration at SAT. So I'm going to support approval.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Any further comments on this application? Councillors? Councillor Wallace?
Can I just ask a further question? Are you able to speculate on the feasibility of just moving everything about 0.5 metre to the north? I guess I can see on the same overshadowing diagram that there's a reasonable distance between each individual lot boundary and the shared driveway that, you know, if you moved everything a little bit over, might reduce the impacts to the south.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, not sure if I want to speculate, but I mean, ultimately we would need to reassess what those impacts would be. There's the obvious one in terms of that access leg that you referred to is making sure that there's adequate manoeuvring with the subdivision approval, I guess, locked in. I guess we just need to make sure that that facilitates safe manoeuvring. There's a number of ways to address the issue that you're referring to, which is trying to minimise overshadowing. It doesn't necessarily mean picking up the development and shifting it. There's other ways to adjust that. So that's just one of the numerous ways that this could be addressed. Ultimately, this is the plan that the applicant is seeking approval for, and that they're wanting a decision to be made.
Thank you.
Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Warner?
I had the privilege of attending the site visit yesterday, and thank you very much for taking us through. Look, I find I'm really conflicted on this one. I feel like there's an inevitability here that when they develop, there is going to be all of these implications onto the neighbourhood, in particular the townhouses. But I'm still not completely comfortable with the level of discretion that we're supposed to apply here. So I'd really like some guidance on just how much we can give here, because the level of discretion just seems to be, from my point of view, just a little bit too far to go with this one.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Councillor Loden?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In listening to everybody's comments and reviewing the RA, I take on board the point about whether this will be challenged in SAT, definitely, but I do tend to agree with Councillor Warner that this is taking too many steps down this discretion line. So my view is that I won't support the officer recommendation and would support an alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. I think, well, if no further speakers, I'll speak to it. I think this is a challenging application. I think that ultimately the constraints on the site are such that what we're seeing in relation to the deemed to comply criteria in terms of overshadowing is not surprising. And I think that I'm accepting that there are constraints on this site, and I think that they would be taken into consideration on that forms part of my decision making. I guess I certainly do take on board the views of other councillors in relation to particularly the overshadowing and whether all has been done in terms of design, to look at the options on the table in relation to potential design changes. And I guess if should a deferral motion come forward to consider overshadowing, I would be supportive of keeping this application live, noting that we are past the time frame. But I guess I would be happy to support a deferral should one come forward. Otherwise, I think ultimately that I think this is an approvable application. And I think that if we were to go down the path of refusal, there is a risk that we may see some challenges through some of the conditions in relation to that we've had it incorporated into the application, but I guess we potentially could end up in the same spot. So yes, I think at this point in time, on balance, I think this is approvable, and so I would support it, but I would also be happy to support a deferral should one come forward. Councillor Alpolo.
Just a question for administration. And it's just the question is can you comment on Councillor Hallett's earlier comment about the reasons why he wouldn't support a deferral? I think he mentioned that we couldn't put all the conditions on it, but I didn't quite understand why we couldn't. So could I just get a clarification on that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, calling back, Councillor Hallett's comment was about the deferral, but ultimately, if there is a deferral, speculating, if there's a deferral, it's available to the applicant to appeal to the State Administrative Tribunal because it's exceeded the statutory timeframe. So it's considered deemed refused. And on that basis, the starting point for the SAT proceedings would be, a deemed refusal without clear reasons for refusal or direction to support any mediation.
Is there any further speakers on this item? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can I put forward a motion for deferral of this item? I want.
Do you want to list your reasons for deferral? And I'll see if
Can I
have a
say
seconder.
that they're contained generally within my alternate for refusal?
Would that be sufficient, administration?
Through the chair, generally for a deferral under the Act for additional information, there is no reason required, but the reasons contained within the alternate will stand in good stead.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Do I have a seconder for the?
Do I
Wait.
need to nominate a timeline? It's probably another governance
Oh,
question.
yes, that's correct.
And would the director be able to suggest one?
Sorry, Councillor Wallace, could you repeat that?
Apologies, Deputy Mayor. It's been pointed out to me by a colleague that I may need to suggest a timeline for this to come back, and just requesting a director to give an appropriate timeline.
Thank you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, timeline would be helpful. Thinking through, we're about to go through an end of year period, so that might impact the ability to turn around plans and provide adequate time for reassessment and potentially re-advertising, depending on the extent of the changes, if any, before it's reconsidered by council. My suggestion would be to then frame it perhaps to say no later than 90 days. If it's November now, that would take us through until the February council round.
You're amenable to that, Councillor Wallace? So we've got a deferral on the table for reasons generally contained within the document on the yellow for this to come back to council after consideration of those matters within a period of 90 days.
Do I have a seconder?
Seconded councillor Warner, there being a procedural motion, there being no debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I'm calling that 5. All those against? Thank you. I call it carried with councillor Iapolo, councillor Castle and councillor Hallett voting against. Now, we will now move. They were the 2 items mentioned in the chamber. We will now move back to the beginning of the agenda to. Oh, okay. Yeah, my apologies. Yes, I think we've got members in the chamber who I think are here interested in a potential discussion that may occur in relation to item 12.3. So we will go to that one next. I've never seen so much interest in the information bulletin. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved councillor Alexander, seconded councillor Iapolo. Councillor Alexander.
I'd like to move an amendment. Before I do, could I say that with a number of councillors, there's been the debate whether just moving straight onto JDAP or discussing it in council is something that should happen. And so I heard someone in the audience say they were very disappointed, et cetera, with council, et cetera. I'm not quite sure how they get that insight to council, because from what I see, councillors are very interested. They certainly have an opinion. It was really wrapped around whether just with council discussing it, whether it made any difference or not, or should it just be moved on to JDAP. And as David knows, I discussed with him last Monday week about discussing this at council and whether things like Celsius and the developments in Fitzgerald Street and the Angrove Street station should be discussed by council. Certainly it's my belief that, and I was surprised that the Bunnings one went through. I didn't even realise well, I knew it hadn't come to council, but I was expecting it to. So, and then I'm also a believer that, you know, council has great experience around the table, and the opportunity for council members to read the responsible authority reports that Jay and others will compile will certainly be informative to us on what should and shouldn't happen. And I believe we have representatives that go to council to discuss it. But I think also that they should probably be carrying the council's view. And so I have an amendment here. Would you like me to read it out, Madam?
I need to hear, I believe I would need to hear from the seconder first, and then we can deal with amendments. Okay. Councillor Iapolo?
I don't need to talk to the substantive, but I do want to talk to the amendment when it's proposed. Thanks.
Okay. Do I have any other councillors who'd like to speak to the substantive of the information bulletin for this month at this stage? Okay, Councillor Alexander, please put forward your amendment.
Okay, that the council receives the information bulletin dated November the 22nd, November 2022, and request the responsible authority reports for the following development assessment panels be presented to a council meeting or special council meeting for council recommendations prior to the respective DAP meetings for lot 4141 to 43, lot 18, and 45, lot 701 Angrove Street, North Perth Service Station. And then numbers 103, lot 278 Alma Road, and 367373, lots 273 to 277 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, which is the mixed development. And the reason, the above mentioned DAP applications are contentious and receive significant community interest during their respective community consultation periods. Council should be provided with an opportunity at council meeting to firstly view and discuss the officer recommendations contained in the responsible authority reports and make a council resolution in line with the officer recommendation, or to provide a different recommendation that would be incorporated in the responsible authority reports that are lodged with the DAP for consideration by the DAP.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Do I have a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Iapolo. Councillor Alexander, do you wish to speak further?
Yes, I just think that, you know, we are representing the ratepayers, we are representing the residents, and that I'm sure everyone has a view of what should be happening on Fitzgerald Street, or what should be happening on Angrove Street, or what shouldn't be happening. And they have the experience and the capacity to put that view forward. I think it's a powerful view if the council determines what it thinks, and that the JDAP and the assessment panel is made aware of that through firstly forwarding the council's opinion, and then the two council representatives have that certainly to speak to. Now, I understand how the responsible authority reports work, and that's Jay and his group look at all the rules and regulations of what's required, and then send a recommendation to council on that. But I think it's worthwhile the council discussing it beforehand on not every single thing that goes to JDAP. It's not just I wouldn't expect to be a blanket agreement that everything, you know, has to, if the council doesn't consider it to be an issue, that it's required to vote or discuss. There are some issues that are significant, and having a service station at the end of Angrove Street is significant. The Solosis development, which I understand, you know, has a 6-storey and a 4-storey limit in certain parts, and there's a requesting of a 13-storey and an 8-storey, is well above the limits required. And with regards to a service station in Angrove Street, you know, one that was there, you know, a long time ago, modern pumps pump out a lot more than, you know, old pumps do. There is new health regulations. There are new health knowledge on why these things shouldn't happen. And I would just like the opportunity to discuss with my fellow councillors those sorts of things, and refer that sort of information and decision onto JDAP.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Iapolo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm supportive of this amendment. You know, I think there's an argument put forward by the people in the public gallery and Councillor Alexander that would say that perhaps all JDAP applications should come to consideration to this council. And by that, I mean that the RA is presented to us for some comment and consideration, and perhaps an opportunity, if the rules permit, for us to make recommendations to that RA, so that the administration's perspective on an issue also includes this council's opinion on that matter. And by default, I guess that just means that as we are elected on behalf to be the voice of residents and ratepayers, that there's more chance that public comment and sentiment is included in, you know, the flavour of the RA. I think, from my understanding, that the process for this to occur, for us to see the RA report and comment as a council, is not contrary to any local government regulation or protocol, and is consistent with the practices of other local government councils, that this would prima facie promote transparency to the community about the position that the City of Vincent's administration adopts through that RA report. It provides an extra avenue and forum for residents and ratepayers to consider, discuss and comment on their position prior to presenting their position at JDAP, which is their right. So it's just an additional opportunity for them to raise any concerns. It also provides the opportunity for council to consider community feedback into that report, as I mentioned. Even if councillors on JDAP are excused from council discussion and debate, at least the broader community and the remaining council have an opportunity to represent community opinion and input into the RA. This is a more informed outcome and position than having two councillors represent the entire council without the rest of council feedback. I think it's also a mitigating measure for the shortcomings of the JDAP process. I read with quite eagerly a council meeting minutes that occurred in this chamber in 2016, when the former Mayor John Carey and the current Mayor Emma Cole were vehemently opposed to the JDAP process, and they spelled out in detail some of the shortcomings of the process. So I think this additional governance check can help mitigate some of the problems that this council before us had already tabled. And finally, Councillor Alexander has mentioned, two current contentious issues that has had significant community interest and concern. Whilst I support, this amendment, which is only restricting this process to the two that he's mentioned, I think it is a question for broader debate as to whether, we should look to having more JDAP applications come, or for the RA report for the JDAP to come to council for its feedback, particularly because, as I understand it, applicants who choose to go to JDAP directly and bypass council, it's for developments over 2 million, which to me doesn't sound very significant. So there is a number of items that could bypass this council. So in summary, I'm supportive of this amendment and really question whether we should go further, but that's a discussion for another day. Thanks.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have some questions, some of which I think are just important to have the answers on the record. In terms of the community consultation that's conducted throughout the application process, that is captured in the RA by administration, is that correct?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's correct.
So the current process as set out by the JDAP is for administration to reflect the views of the community, or to incorporate the views of the community as captured in the consultation in their recommendation to the JDAP, in the same way that they do in their recommendations to council.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, almost identical in terms of how it's presented in the RAR.
Okay. And possibly a governance question. I'm just wondering, the position of a JDAP member when they are appointed to that panel, are they appointed as a member who is required to represent the views of council, or to make a decision based on their own position, taking into account the information that's presented to them in a planning matter, as we do as councillors when we sit when we decide on planning matters at council?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the DAP, as the JDAP members already know, has a code of conduct and provides guidance on how JDAP members, all JDAP members, whether they're the council members or independent members, must behave and act when deciding these matters. And just like council, it is what we call a quasi-judicial process. All members of the JDAP, like council members determining DAs, must use their discretion and judgment to assess an application impartially, with all the other legal considerations around due process, transparency, accountability, within the legal framework in which the council or JDAP are required to, and that's the statutory planning framework under the Planning and Development Act.
Thank you. So I suppose my interpretation of that is that each of the JDAP members, including the non-council members, would be taking into account the community consultation as presented in the RA. But the council members are not required to present a view of council if a position has been stated by council, that it's not their obligation to then vote in accordance with council's position.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's right. If council, for instance, as proposed, and for other councils who do this practice, if council made a decision about an RAR before it's submitted, it doesn't impact, it has zero impact on the RAR. The RAR goes to the JDAP Secretariat, and then there'll be a section whether council's endorsed that RAR, or if they haven't endorsed it, what the council decision was about it. So then all JDAP members, and they're not treated differently, can reflect on that when they're making their quasi-judicial, independent, impartial decision about the development application only at the point that all the information around that application has been presented, which can include comments from the public gallery before the JDAP meeting, just like council meetings here, and just like council members here deciding a DA, JDAP members cannot essentially provide any indication that they've got any sense of bias or what the lawyers term apprehended bias. You're not allowed, that would prejudice the decision-making process and essentially open up to legal challenge if all members of a decision-making, quasi-judicial decision-making body were not using their independent judgment once all information about application has been presented before the decision's been made.
Thank you. And that led to my next question, which just confirmation that council doesn't have the ability to instruct administration to amend the RA or to include any particular information or to exclude any information from the RA.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's right. The RA stands, it stands independently. The council consideration of that would be a separate council decision commenting on the RAR, endorse or don't endorse with or without the following comments, which council then could add. And that decision of council, because it would be formalised, would be presented separately.
Okay, thank you. And a question for the manager. Do you have any indication of what impact in general terms on the timeline this council's consideration of a RA would be, how that might affect the applications, or perhaps how that might impact the need for special council meetings?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the amendment before you refers only to the two applications for Celsius that we're referring to in North Perth, as well as the service station in North Perth. In administration's comment, you'll see reference to some considerations that council should have in, I guess, forming a view around the acceptability of this amendment. One of those impacts would be to timeframes, particularly for these live applications. There is a journey that we have been on, and ultimately at this point in time, that could compromise the preparation and formalisation of administration's view and the RAR preparation. You'd also need to factor in the council meeting date and the cycle. We're about to, approach the end of year as well, so that could be problematic. It doesn't appear like a scheduled council meeting would fall in line with either of those items, the RAR deadlines that have been set by the DAP. So that also would require a response around perhaps calling a special council meeting. There are clearly responses that can be put in place, but they would all lead to potentially compromising the statutory timeframe, which is set by the DAP, and that is prescribed.
Thank you. Could you also give an indication, if you're able to, what weight, if any, the JDAP would give to a council position on the RA?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'd probably just summarise it. Just as a council, JDAP could only take into consideration planning matters and relevant planning matters. They're required, just like council is required, to exclude non-planning matters.
Okay, and so in terms of those planning matters, they would presumably already have been addressed in the RA. That's obviously the point of the report.
Through Deputy Mayor, the planning staff wouldn't be doing their job if they hadn't done that. So that would be an issue. Can I just comment on what the manager said about the timeframes for the two applications that we're talking about, Celsius and Angove Street? We have hundreds of public submissions. So the one planning officer needs literally every hour of every day between now and when we submit that RAR to go through individually and give due consideration to one of several hundred public submissions. They're not all form submissions. They're all different, taking in different aspects, and we need to show and demonstrate in that consultation section of that report how the planning staff have considered and responded to all those hundreds of public submissions that we've received for both applications.
Thank you. And just a couple more questions. I'm just wondering what in your opinion, this might, what impact this might have on the JDAP members and their participation in either the council decision or their participation at JDAP. Would that compromise it, or how would they manage that, any conflict?
This is probably a reasonable time to note my conflict of interest in this matter, I suppose, in terms of being a JDAP member, as is Councillor Wallace and Councillor Hallett and Loden being alternates. I just feel that we should be noting that at this point in time. Thank you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, it's a good question. It's actually a little bit grey, so it's not clear. There's no guidance from the Department of Planning about this, and if there's a conflict of interest, it might be an impartiality interest. If that if a JDAP member and council wanted to declare that, but that wouldn't provide a reason to not to be in the room and to vote on that matter. So councillors can't leave the room. They would still be in the room and voting on that RAR, and then they would have to change hats when they then go to a JDAP meeting and consider the application on its merits once all the other information has been received. So it is a little bit of a grey area, and that is something which might be useful for us to try to clarify with the department around two different pieces of legislation, the Local Government Act and what council does here in terms of conflicts of interest under the Local Government Act, and then when council members who serve on JDAP go to the JDAP meeting, and that is 100% under the Planning and Development Act.
Thank you. One more question. I just have a question around if we were to proceed, not just in relation to this particular amendment, but down a path where we considered contentious items or considered the RAR of contentious items. I suppose I have some concerns about how we would determine that and how that might impact our requirement for proper and orderly planning. Does council or does administration, sorry, have a view that it's sort of all in or none in?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I think it would, as we put in our comment to Councillor Alexander's amendment, I think it'd be most useful for council to have a discussion about that because this is essentially a council process, and it'd be really useful for the council members who are currently on JDAP or previously served on JDAP to talk about how this would interact and play out between a council meeting and a JDAP meeting. We've said we can accommodate it. It's an administrative issue and a process issue for us because we'd be supporting a new meeting. It would be very unlikely that you could ever synchronize a JDAP meeting to fall between the short time frame between submitting an RAR and the JDAP meeting. It would probably be never the case that it falls on a meeting like tonight, which is a monthly ordinary council meeting. So we'd need to make sure that all council members were available to attend a special council meeting called at extremely short notice to read a extremely long planning report in the contentious matters, taking up hundreds of submissions as well. So that would be an availability issue for council members. Staff will be here to support that if that's the way that council wanted to go. It'd be very useful for council to agree a position on what items it may or may not want to see for particular reasons, and some of the reasons have been articulated by Councillor Alexander in the amendment put tonight.
Thank you. I suppose that segues into my position on this, given that we have a council workshop scheduled to discuss this matter. I'm not in general in favour of process on the run. I think that this is a premature discussion to be having before as a council, that we've had a workshop discussion around the pros and cons and how that might practically work for both council and for our JDAP members. I'm conscious that I have never sat on the JDAP and there's the inner workings that I'm not aware of. So I am very interested to hear from them about how that impacts their approach to these decisions and whether that has any negative impact. I'm very mindful of a lot of the evidence that seems to have been put forward that a council position does not seem to impact the outcome on JDAP, and I'm not in favour of using council resources unnecessarily if it won't change the outcome. I think we're better served by assisting our community to engage with the JDAP process, which is what a lot of councillors have been trying to do. None of this is to say that I have formed a view on this application. I can't, because not only am I not a decision maker, but I haven't seen all of the relevant information. But I think it is really important that we're very mindful of this process and we don't try and jump ahead to a position that we're really not able to form at this stage. So I'm very happy to have the discussion with my fellow councillors and for us to form a position on how we would like to address these types of matters going forward. But I'm not going to support this amendment to have a knee-jerk reaction in this particular case.
Thank you. Councillor Apollo.
Councillor Castle raised two good questions. One, she raised the potential conflict with JDAP members, and I just wanted to clarify from administration when, if in fact those members can actually vote and participate in discussion on this. That's my first question.
Through Deputy Mayor, unless the manager or executive director tell me otherwise in the next few seconds, it's not a financial or proximity interest. So it's not an interest that councillors would need to leave the room for. If councillors wanted to, like they have just mentioned, in impartiality interest, that requires them to still stay in the room and vote on the matter. It's not clear to us whether or not that needs to be declared, but it's already been noted, which Wendy will have in the minutes. Executive Director has some experience about this at another council as well. So,
through the chair, Local Government Act only gives some exceptions or exemptions from council members actually voting. So you must, if you're in the chamber, you must vote. You can't abstain from a vote. So you can either be not vote if you're absent from the room, or you can't participate in debates or voting where you have a financial interest or a proximity interest. Other than that, you need to vote when you're in the chamber under the Act.
So JDAP members do get paid for sitting on JDAP. So is that considered a financial interest?
Through the chair, so the state government has prepared frequently asked questions for DAP members on these things, and it specifically covers about making council decisions and voting, and it's very clear that you can vote on a council decision on a RA, but you would need to declare an impartiality interest at the DAP meeting, and that would need to be considered by the presiding member.
Okay, so I'm assuming everything's okay. For this discussion, Councillor Castle made another good point, and I just want to ask a question to administration. She made the comment that that the RA obviously needs to be prepared in accordance with all the the planning code and the planning elements and everything. But an important part of discussion when these matters come to council is this discretion. So I guess under JDAP, is there any discretion that can still be shown by members as can be done when the matters are coming to council? Because I guess where I'm going with that is, would the RA give an opinion by administration in relation to the planning elements that are available for any level of discretion?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, all planning elements where discretion is sought is the subject of the RA. The DAP do not have any greater powers than council, so bound by the same planning framework and same planning considerations.
So to address that question, just so I get this correct, there would be some, this is a question to administration, there would be some benefit potentially for council to input into a RA in relation to the elements that would have some discretion, because the position on council who represent the broader community could be more or less inclined to want to show discretion based on community sentiment than perhaps what administration would put into the RA report.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, if your question is asking does council have a different appetite and perhaps a different approach in terms of discretion? That might be reasonable. I guess ultimately the administration is responsible for making a recommendation based on the planning elements and the discretion being sought. We will have a view. Council, if they were to view this, they might have a different view in terms of whether discretion should or should not be exercised.
That answers it. There is, to me, there is the administration in doing the RA that will make an opinion as to how much discretion they believe should be warranted when considering the drafting of a RA, which then goes to JDAP. And I guess my point was to address Councillor Castle's concern. If council had a different opinion onto that, then having the RA come to us would allow us to perhaps show a different level of discretion based on community sentiment.
Through Mayor Cole, just to correct you, Councillor, the last point would be based on planning matters. I think you used the word based on community sentiment. That community sentiment would need to be related to planning matters, and not necessarily just community sentiment, which should have been considered in the public consultation process.
Okay. And my last question is just before I propose an amendment to to Councillor Alexander's amendment, in administration's view, would the amendment that's been proposed be would it be prudent to insert the word draft in front of responsible authority reports to make it clearer, or is it just clear enough that it's not the final report that would come to us?
Sorry, Councillor Apollo, it would be the final report that would come to council. The technical officers are not preparing the RA for council, they're preparing it for the JDAP. So it would be finalised prior to coming to council, and council. Anyway, I just wanted to make that clarification. So the RA that officers would be preparing is not for council, it is for JDAP, and council does not have the capacity to influence that process through a decision.
So then my question is, would this be ineffective? Because you're saying that the way that the amendment is drafted, it's saying that the RA final comes to council for consideration. We can give our comments, but the RA would be unchanged as to what goes to JDAP. So maybe Councillor Alexander the amendment is really looking for is a discussion on the issues before the RA is drafted.
Thank you, Councillor Apollo. I suggest, well, we have to deal with the amendment as stands, but should the amendment fall, or once we're back to the substantive, it would be up to you if you wish to bring another amendment or proceed with the substantive. Do you have anything further? No, you've already spoken. So do I have any other? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't have a black and white position on this, but I do have some concerns about whether this achieves an actual benefit in outcomes for the community. We don't have a clear definition of what warrants some JDAP applications being brought to council and not others. And I think there's some challenges in bringing some applications forward and not others. Why that's important is that not all applications garner the passion of the service station campaign, but where there are still important community concerns. I'm concerned that having a council meeting prior to a JDAP with no decision-making power, where residents present their concerns, may result in that energy dissipating and not be replicated at the actual JDAP, where it's most important, as that's where the majority of decision makers will actually be. I understand that's not the case for this Angrove Street application, and I hope everyone that spoke tonight will also be attending the JDAP to speak at that. I think it also does put councillors who are JDAP members in a difficult position of publicly supporting a position prior to the actual decision-making forum, and it reduces our credibility in arguing a position at JDAP, potentially reducing our influence in swaying state members. And I'm reluctant to support something that might risk our ability to get good outcomes at JDAP without some clearer reasons why this change will actually benefit the community. Having said that, I do think finding alternate ways for community members to participate in a JDAP consultation is important. Completing a written submission may not be inclusive of everyone. But we also have a workshop coming up scheduled to interrogate the city's processes in relation to JDAPs. I'm happy to hear other perspectives and always open to change my mind about how we do things if it's going to result in a better community outcome. If that occurs, we do have an existing call-in power that we can use to request a special meeting to discuss JDAP applications. And so I don't see this amendment as necessary, and so won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just on the conflict of interest conversation. So in my past experience as a JDAP member, I've regularly engaged with members of the community that are influenced or impacted by a development. And I do that in my role as a council member. And then when I move into the JDAP form, I'm there as a JDAP member. And so I wouldn't, if we were to include a process where I was representing as a council member and then representing as a JDAP member, I would just, as was sort of highlighted, declare an impartiality from that interaction. And that, from my point of view, would be satisfactory. I note that the legislation is, and the guidelines is silent on that, but where I've done that, that has always been acceptable to the presiding member. I was curious to understand what knowledge we have from the Sterling process. I know that they do a fortnightly meeting rather than a monthly meeting, but that they also consider all their JDAPs. And I just wanted to know if there was any insights we gained from that would help with this process.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that was shared with us in terms of the Sterling experience. It's a different setup slightly in terms of how council is run. The key difference, for example, is that the frequency of council meetings. I understand that they meet every fortnight. So there's a different approach. And I guess in terms of the opportunity to be before council, I guess it might assist them in terms of frequency. And I understand that they also have a separate planning committee, which functions a little bit differently. Again, my understanding is they consider these things and then provide a recommendation, don't have decision-making power, but we probably need to flesh that out, as well as how other local governments deal with these where they are presenting it to council. Reference was made to the workshop, and that maybe that's an opportunity, I guess, to have a look at how different types of models operate and the advantages and disadvantages.
Thanks for that, Manager. So just to clarify your comment back there, so there exists like a subcommittee of the council that as a planning subcommittee that considers all JDAP items once administration has prepared the final report, and then makes a recommendation to council, which is then considered at the council meeting, and then is subsequently considered a JDAP.
Through Deputy Mayor, we'll confirm that if that's exactly how it plays out, but they do have subcommittees. And I guess I was just identifying that there are key differences in terms of how council is structured here and how we operate.
Do we know if they have challenges with meeting their timeframes for delivering their RARs? And is there any reason why they're in a different reality than us?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I wouldn't be able to speak confidently whether they are or aren't experiencing challenges with their setup.
It would be interesting to understand that, I guess, when we get to this conversation at the workshop space. But from my perspective, I think the JDAP process would benefit from some greater community participation. It is somewhat, the timing of these sessions is generally difficult for people to access who have day jobs, basically, anybody who works 9 to 5, because they're all in those windows. It's part of the challenge of being on a JDAP as well. And so having that opportunity for a conversation for the community, I think would be good, but I am very cognizant of the consistency aspect here. I don't think we can just call in 2 out of all of them. I think it either needs to be all or none, because unless we've got some really clear guidance on what is defined as a contentious JDAP application, this does require a lot more conversation, I think. I am very aware of the timeframe and the need for the community to have a say, but that opportunity is really at those JDAP meetings when those come along. If the volume of people who showed up at tonight's meeting showed up at a JDAP meeting, that would be fantastic to provide that level of sentiment to the community. Where I've seen those large numbers of community members coming and expressing their opinions, that I believe that has influenced those decisions that I've been involved in. So I think that is the best path forward for these applications. So from my perspective, I don't support the amendment, but I do support that principle of how do we get that additional engagement from the community into these processes as well. And I really do look forward to the workshop where we do discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Any further speakers? Councillor Warner.
I'm going to support this amendment because I feel like this has brought the issue to a head. With the Bunnings situation a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't aware it was headed to JDAP on that day until I started receiving abusive text messages from people who were unhappy with the results. So I think that our process needs to be tweaked here, for want of a better expression. And I really do acknowledge and appreciate the fact that admin have already stepped up to that, and we've already initiated the process with a future workshop to investigate how we can deal with JDAP matters in the future. I am really conscious of the fact that even if we do have a discussion on this, that it can have little impact. And I'm particularly frightened of having a negative impact on any JDAP decisions. I don't want us to compromise that situation in any way. I can only imagine what was said back in 2016 when this was first proposed. Wow, I wish I'd been watching then. So I think as a councillor, as someone who put their hand up to say, I want to be the voice of the community or to represent the voice of the community, I want to be able to have a say, at least with my colleagues, at least to investigate the pros and cons of each situation. I do take offence at some of the comments that have been sent to us. I don't feel like I've been gagged, and I take exception to that. I take exception to being told that we are disappointing because we haven't done certain things. We haven't discussed this matter because A, it's not part of our process, but B, there hasn't been a RA report to discuss. So to be told that we're disappointing is quite disappointing, frankly. Sorry, I'm dripping like crazy. So basically, we're trying to draw comparisons too between our council and other councils, and I think that's like apples and oranges. I think that the Stirling situation, for example, they are vastly different. They just their sheer size, the number of wards, the way that they operate is completely different to us. So I don't think we can just quite basically compare ourselves to Stirling and to other councils like that. But I would really appreciate having the workshop to flesh out the pros and cons of how we can proceed with JDAP matters in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'm deeply sceptical about the potential for this proposal to kind of influence a DAP outcome, and I'm really aware of the potential for it to influence in the manner, I guess, opposite to what the community is seeking through this. I'm also really sceptical about the potential for, I guess, additional administrative burden and cost to, I guess, hear additional community, well, deal with a whole nother meeting cycle really that's going to be required to meet the timeframes to make this happen. I guess if this were to occur, I think it should absolutely be the exception and not the rule. But having said that, I think both of these items are really exceptional items. And I think what's come through during the community consultation process is that the community is really seeking to see and hear councillors speak on and debate these items in a public forum. And I guess that's the basis for my decision tonight, which I think is to support this. So yeah, I guess that's actually all I had to say.
Thank you. I'll speak to it. I think we need to, first up, I think that we need to be careful about when we talk about 2016 that we get it right. I think that previously the position of council put forward related to having councillors being a decision maker, not a commenter. And I think that we have good planning expertise around here at the table. And I think that we have the capacity to deal with all sorts of developments, consideration of the valid planning matters. I also believe that the city's position previously, when we've discussed this previously, it has absolutely advocated for increased accessibility. But I also have really strong concerns about making sure that information is available to all decision makers. And I think that is where my commentary on these matters has been. It's been around ensuring that we have people take part in the process and participate in meaningful and appropriate situation to the decision at hand. I think I wasn't noting any actual conflict of interest in relation to this matter, but just felt that it was appropriate to note that there are council members in the chamber that sit on the DAP and also sit on council. We have a fiduciary duty to each group that we sit on. And that is, as Councillor Loden has articulated, that exists, and by accepting the appointment to the JDAP and also being sworn in as an elected member, we have duties to represent the interests of the groups that we sit on, and that those two things can exist side by side. Look, I think from my perspective in relation to the amendment, I'm very happy that we're having a discussion. I feel that subsequent to that discussion, there would be the opportunity to proceed with any particular course of action. But I guess I'm not willing to make a call in relation to this without having that discussion. I believe in process, and for me, I need to get more of an understanding of what would be expected in relation to the wording of potential recommendations and what council would be asking to sign off on in relation to a council recommendation as referenced here in the amendment. I'm absolutely happy to have the discussion in relation to council policy, but I think that discussion needs to be had in the appropriate forum, and that I note that it is scheduled for the 29th of November. I also understand that the RA for the Fitzgerald Street development is due to the DAP on the 5th of December 2022. And as such, I feel that the timeframes to allow for adequate decision making, if should this amendment be supported, could put at risk the statutory timeframes for the DAP application, and I am not supportive of that. That said, another item could come forward at another time, or council administration could have a discussion on the 29th that would influence my views. But at this point in time, I am satisfied with the process that the city currently has, and so I won't be supporting the amendment. There's no right of reply on amendment, is there? Thank you for that reminder. I believe everybody has spoken. I will put the amendment. All those in favour? Or in favour? All those against? Or against? I use my casting. Against. Thank you. The item is lost. Is there any further speakers to the substantive? Councillor Alexander, you will close debate because you moved this item. Is there any further speakers prior to Councillor Alexander? No. Councillor Alexander.
One of the things I'm concerned about when we tell and we get voted in by ratepayers to discuss significant issues, basically what not accepting the amendment is suggesting, maybe when we have a full council discussion, it may change, but at this stage, significant issues won't be discussed by council, i.e. Bunnings, i.e. Angrove Street, i.e. Celsius. So why are we being voted in by people if we're not going to discuss these things?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you.
Now, some people want to make statements and then build on those statements, and the first statement is not necessarily true. It's not necessarily premature bringing this discussion forward, and it's not necessarily true that a JDAP is not influenced by a council who is decided that they like something or don't like something and have a view. How do our JDAP representatives get the council's view? Through an administrator's view, certainly, but not necessarily by those elected by council. So, I have some significant concerns with just perhaps doing a Pontius Pilate and washing your hands of significant issues. And, I think they're worth debating. I was surprised. I was expecting the Bunnings issue to come to council. then I hear from others that the Pickle District is wanted as an arts precinct. Well, that's nice. I've never heard that was going to be an arts precinct. And what is an arts precinct? You know, is it an arts facility every, 50 metres? I'm not sure. An arts precinct, I'm sure is a good thing. But there hasn't been one iota of discussion at council. And so my expectation is that significant issues come to council. And we have people with, as you said, good planning skills and those sorts of things. At the very least, when ratepayers and residents come to us and ask questions, by having significant discussions in this arena, you can at least answer some of those. You can discuss these things with administration, and administrations are going to do their RAR. Is that without any council input? Apparently so. And so what we have is some JDAP representatives who go and read the tea leaves as they see it and cast a vote at JDAP. So I'm concerned about not having significant issues come to this council for discussion. I think at the very least that should happen.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. That closes debate. I will now put the substantive motion. All those in favour? All those in favour of the information bulletin? I call it carried. Thank you. We will now move back to item 9.2, advertising of reviewed local planning policy number 7.5.13% for art. My apologies, I'm reading this the wrong way around. 9.4, wayfinding signage plan. Councillor Arpolo, do you wish to move this item? Can I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I had a discussion with Ms. Gloucester offline, so I just thought I would talk about that to make sure my understanding is correct and it's tabled in chamber. From what I understand, this plan is a framework, and the $198,000 referenced as phase one spend for FY23 is already approved in the capital works budget. This was approved ahead of the completion of the plan, which is up for adoption tonight. The request for council adoption is merely then to agree to the framework and the finer detail of the implementation. I also understand that there is no additional major works or phases planned nor anticipated, but in the event that the need does arise, that my understanding is a request for spend will come before council for approval, either as a separate item or via the annual budgetary process. On this basis, if that is correct, I do not have any specific comments regarding the details in the plan. But what I would like to say is that the Imagineering of this project well preceded my joining this council. I do believe that the objectives of a plan that promotes our town centres as a destination and that better connects Vincent's many town centres is a worthwhile pursuit. The matter for consideration, in my view, is striking an appropriate balance between useful on-ground signage and the environmental considerations that increasing visual pollution has on the footprint of our city. The information continues to transition from physical to digital, and most residents and visitors will access directional info from Google Maps on their phones. I support this plan for its intent, but we do need to balance the usefulness of physical over digital information with cost and sustainability considerations. If and when council is requested to fund more spend under this framework, I'd expect these factors are addressed by administration in their request. One final observation, local government has three very powerful assets at its disposal: landholding, the power to influence and change zoning, and intellectual property in the form of information. The intellectual property is an incredibly detailed understanding of the characteristics of the area within Vincent's boundaries. This wayfinding project has the scope to add to that IP, but the real value is commercialising it to generate non-rate revenue streams that simultaneously benefit the community. For example, how valuable is it to the real estate market to know from one credible source, i.e. a local government, the relevant local government, in relation to a property for sale, the distance to nearby playgrounds and reserves, the distance to public transport networks, the residential density surrounding a property, the accessibility of the property to certain businesses. Conversely, information on whether certain services are under-indexed within a local government boundaries based on locality of competitors and residential density would be valuable to potential new businesses looking to set up operations in Vincent. My point being here, to do this, information must be digitised, and the scope of projects like wayfinding ought to include in future consideration to the digital realm to maximise our commercial opportunities. I'd encourage further discussion from this council to mandate the CEO to explore commercial opportunities to build City of Vincent's IP and diversify our revenue streams away from non-rate sources so that plans like wayfinding are more progressive in its thinking and approach. If there is support from this idea from council to be incorporated into this plan of future, I certainly would welcome it. But in terms of what is presented, I support the plan. But the point I'm making is that I think that we can go further. I think there is some IP that can be built on this. And I think that we should, as a council, look to diversify our revenue streams away from rates and reliance on ratepayers. And I think that our IP and information about our understanding of what's within our boundaries is a real opportunity that we should be exploring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aupolo. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I love it. It's really exciting to see this come forward. I am a big fan of this approach to wayfinding, and it's consistent with what some of the great cities around the world. And it's also really great to see our parking cash in lieu being used. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Is there any further speakers on this item? No? All right, I would just say that, yes, I'm very excited to see this happen. And I appreciate Councillor Aupolo in his discussion in relation to the funding for the implementation. And that this is effectively a guiding document that will see how signage and wayfinding materials are rolled out throughout the city going forwards. This has been something I think that I really didn't fully appreciate the benefit of when I first joined council, and I have certainly grown to appreciate the benefits of good wayfinding and particularly for travellers and visitors or people looking to do something new and out of the ordinary. I'm also particularly excited to see that we can potentially use this to connect people both between our town centres but with all the other amazing facilities we have in the City of Vincent. As people become used to our signage presentation, they'll start to look for that for City of Vincent facilities and bike paths and town centres and business. So I think it's fantastic and I'm very pleased to see it come to this stage. If there being no further speakers on this item, or Councillor Alexander.
I have a concern we only got presented with one option, and that was that we would have 6 colours, and cities like Perth, Adelaide, Sydney all have one colour. The City of Vincent's colour, as I understand it, is ruby or maroon on the signage that I see. The City of Vincent is now not going to have a colour. Yet, you know, Oxford Street and Beaufort Street and everywhere else is going to have a colour. And I just think that's a dumb idea. And I'm concerned about why the consultant who cost us over $100,000 couldn't make a personal appearance. We had one short phone conversation with him where he presented one option. And I think that's inadequate. And I think 6 colours is not very bright.
Or too bright, as the case may be. Sorry.
Perhaps too bright. Yep, maybe.
Okay. Did you have any other comments on this item, Councillor Alexander?
Oh, I support Councillor Albright's view that mobile devices now are used a lot more, and I hope mobile devices are used in this wayfinding project as well.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? All those against? I call it carried with Councillor Alexander voting against. We'll move to item 10.2, EOI for e-scooter shared scheme in the City of Vincent. Can I have a mover, please, for this item? Councillor Hallett. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions first. It's been referred to as a trial. What are the measures for success that the city would be looking for? And how does that differ from trial evaluations being conducted in Perth and Stirling? And then what's the rationale for doing it as a trial and also not waiting until the outcome of our neighbouring councils?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, 12 months is a long enough period to get a good sense of how they work and can be embedded into our transport system and then be available for a long enough period of time for people to change behaviours and form a view on whether they do or don't like them. The suggestion was essentially an approval of 12 months plus an extension for another 12 months. So it could be up to 2 years. If after 12 months, we would obviously be tracking complaints. If it was causing disruption on the street and we weren't able to manage that with the provider, and we're essentially forming an assessment on the benefit versus the disbenefit, the transport and mobility benefit versus some of the issues around visual pollution or clutter or the like, or accidents or conflict on footpaths. We'd put that into a report to council with what we'd undertaken some community consultation engagement with both the users and non-users of the e-scooters. We'd put that to council in advance of the 12-month mark, and council would form a view on whether or not they wanted that second 12-month period to be granted to any operator.
Thank you. And just under the financial implications, it says that the city would require the approved operator to pay for signage. Can you just confirm what that would entail and how it would intersect with the rollout of the wayfinding strategy?
Through your Deputy Mayor, probably the best example close to ourselves, the City of Stirling, and what they've set up in their trial area, including along the beach, by signage. We're essentially just talking about spaces for docking and for dropping off or picking up the e-scooters. And what they've got in Scarborough's on the footpaths, essentially markings painted on where it's very clear that this is a pickup or a drop-off spot. So we can try to consolidate where the e-scooters are dropped off or picked up. And that helps also with the provider when they go around picking up the e-scooters, which might be abandoned in those areas that aren't there. So we're not talking about advertising for the e-scooters, just about marking on how to use them and where they should or shouldn't be left.
Thank you. Appreciate the city administration adding in some additional criteria around the environmental considerations of the company and the product. I'm happy to support the rest of the recommendation.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'm super supportive of this. It is really disappointing that City of Perth has chosen to go it alone through their process, ostensibly off the back of some legal advice, which I haven't seen, so I can't comment on, but it would have really been great if we could have negotiated this as a collective group of local governments who will all have to deal with this company, share the same, well, mostly the same concerns and considerations. And I do feel like we're going to be boxed into a position where we have to go with whatever Perth chooses, but I look forward to seeing what comes out of this expression of interest process and kind of, you know, keenly negotiating terms and conditions on behalf of our community and residents if that occurs, if this gets voted in. I guess, you know, Stirling's been doing it for a while. I spoke to Tim, whose title I forget, so apologies to Tim. He said that the kind of feedback from Stirling, I think that I had over 1,000 submissions, that have been like the most commented item that they put out on, and it was 65% in favour, which is a significant number of people that were pissed off enough to comment against it. So I think, yeah, this is a major change to streetscape, public amenity, our town centres and things like that, and it needs to be managed really, really carefully. But it's also really exciting. I've been personally riding an e-scooter for a year. I'm personally quite lazy. I was never going to ride a bike. It's the one thing that's got me out of a car. And like, I hope that that is something that happens across our community and through all the people who would otherwise be planning on using Charles Street to commute through Vincent. So yeah, support.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Is there any further speakers on this item? Councillor Warner.
Yeah, look, Ashley, Councillor Wallace, well done, well said. And yeah, I also want to just comment that I am quite disappointed that when we were first given this idea, there was the plan that it would be a bunch of councils that were connected that were going to be working together to bring this in, and I'm really disappointed that that's not happening, because you know the whole point of this is to transport people, and if you've got a geo border and all of a sudden you've got to stop, then that's a bit of a problem. But I feel like we can only do what we can do, and I look forward to seeing what this brings to us.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Any further speakers on this item? No, I'll put it. All those in favour? Call it carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 11.4. The first quarter budget review 2022-2023. It's an absolute majority decision, and Councillor Warner is leaving the room as she has declared a financial interest in this matter. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Wallace, seconded Councillor Arpalo.
I don't have much to say on it. Sorry, I'm just moving it as written.
Thank you. Councillor Arpalo.
Really have any comment, but I did have some questions which I dealt offline with Reece, and I'm happy with the explanations, so I don't have any other comment.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers or questions on this item? No, then I'll put it. All those in favour? I call it carried. Noting Councillor Warner is absent. She could be retrieved. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the items on the public agenda for this evening. We're now going to consider a confidential item in relation to Tamala Park Regional Council. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go behind closed doors? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? I call that carried. Wendy.